Outside, the great blue night hangs over the churchyard and its trees. Such silence now reigns in the town that signs and whisperings among the shadows down there reach up to me in my eyrie. And once an imprudent laugh pierces the darkness. I feel as if at this moment no one in the world is lonelier than I, Tycho Gabriel Glas, doctor of medicine, who at times help others, but have never been able to help myself, and who, at past 30 years of age, have never been near a woman. Welcome to Positive Read-Ins. Support this channel and new literature by getting your copy of Commutin'. You can link to this novel in the description. You can also link to the Gymnasia Press website, where you can find other works like the short story collection Comorbidities and the novel Non-Local. Thank you. The read-in at the opening of this video is from the novel Dr. Glas. This is by Hjalmar Soderberg. He's was a Swedish writer. He wrote this novel in 1905. The novel is written in the form of a diary. It begins in June and it goes into October. And it's the musings on life by Dr. Glas. He is an isolated individual. He's unhappy. He only falls in love with women who are in love with other men. As in the passage I read, he says he's past 30 years of age and he's never been near a woman. That's not exactly correct. He does talk about an intimate relationship that he had, really just kissing a woman when he was younger, and then she eventually died. But he has no real connection with women. One day, a woman named Mrs. Gregorius comes to see him. She's married to this much older man, the vicar in the town, this religious leader who Dr. Glas despises. And she basically reveals to him that she's having this affair, and she wants Dr. Glas to help her get her husband, the minister in town, to stop trying to, what she calls, extract his right, which would be stop trying to sleep with her. And this eventually drives Dr. Glas to not only first help her, but lie to the vicar and try to get him to believe that his health is bad, but eventually to actually contemplate and then to actually kill the vicar, that's where we get by the end of the novel. So the novel has action, but it's not high action, and it's a quite dark and brooding novel. They call it on the back here, stark, brooding, and enormously controversial. I don't think it will read as being that controversial today, but I think the controversial elements were, one, the fact that you have a religious figure who wants to sleep with his wife all the time and then eventually gets killed. We have some maybe promotion of abortion through some parts here. So you get a seemingly normal culture, a normal society. We see the underside of it, which is similar to what we get in a lot of novels. There's a number of philosophical musings in this novel with Dr. Glas, but also some of his, they're not really friends, they're the closest thing that he has to friends, these people he runs into when he's off walking or trying to sit down at a cafe. So he has some interaction with people. We get some ideas. Definitely, this, I would say, is a novel of ideas. One big theme that's related to death and his decision to murder the vicar is action. He says early on, this is on page 19, in the June 14th entry, he says, "Position, respectability, future, as if I were not ready any day or moment to stow these packages aboard the first ship to come sailing by laden with action." So he wants action. He's willing to give give up his position in the town as the doctor, give up his respectability, the money he's making, if he can get some action in his life. He feels like he has no action in his life, like he's an NPC, right? He's not doing anything. He's just kind of going along with the times, and he wants to act. This comes up again later. Page 93. This is a section where he's, in his diary, he's kind of arguing with himself whether he should kill the vicar or not, deciding if he's going to do this. He's going to kill, the plan was to kill him using these cyanide capsules that he has, presumably for his own suicide. First and foremost, do I really want to kill the clergyman? This is what he's asking himself. Want to? Well, and what does that mean? A human will is no unit. It's a synthesis of hundreds of conflicting impulses. A synthesis is a fiction. The will is a fiction. But we need fictions, and no fiction is more needful to us than the will. Well then, do you want to? I want to, and I don't want to. I hear conflicting voices. I must interrogate them. I must know why. The one says, I want to, and the other, I don't want to. You first, who say, I want to. Why do you want to? Reply. And he goes on to talk about why he wants to do this. So he's questioning whether we even have a will. The will is a fiction. It's a synthesis. He doesn't, a synthesis of conflicting choices, conflicting plans, desires that people want to act out. He later talks about this as wanting to basically do everything we can, like in the fact that having a choice basically means we have to curtail ourselves. We have to deny a certain part of ourselves. Developing this point, he says, I want to act. Life is action. When I see something that makes me indignant, I want to intervene. If I don't intervene every time I see a fly in a spider's web, this is because the world of flies and spiders is not mine. I know one must limit oneself, and I don't like flies. But if I see a beautiful little insect with shimmering gold wings caught in a web, then I tear the web to pieces and kill the spider, if need be, for I do not believe it is forbidden to kill spiders. I go walking in the forest, I hear a cry of distress, I run towards the cry, and find a man about to rape a woman. Naturally, I do what I can to free her, and if need be, kill the man. The law does not give me the right to do so. The law only gives me the right to kill another in self-defense. And by self-defense, the law only means defense when in direct peril of my own life. The law does not let me kill someone else to save my father or my son or my best friend, or to protect my beloved from violence or rape. In a word, the law is absurd, and no self-respecting person allows his actions to be determined by it. And he goes on to talk about how morality and the law, the law is in flux, and morality is just others' views of right. So he's questioning kind of the core tenets of society. We're only supposed to kill to protect ourselves, but this is absurd in some cases because we need to protect loved ones. And he's thinking about this woman. She's kind of the one being raped, even though it's actually her husband, and he acknowledges that. That makes it kind of more complicated. So this is a quite complicated novel in this regards. You know, I don't think anyone in 1905 was talking about women being raped by their husbands, but that is something that is talked about today in the kind of the oppressive nature of certain marriages. And this character is focusing on that oppressive nature and trying to help this woman out, but at the same time, he is trying to bring meaning to his own life. And unfortunately, it's killing that's going to bring a certain meaning to his life. But as we'll see by the end, it doesn't bring much meaning or enough meaning for him. Only brings about more confusion. A last point on this theme of will and action in life. He says, this is later in the novel, almost at the end, August 9th. To will is to be able to choose. Oh, that it should be so hard to choose. Choice is self-denial. Oh, that self-denial should be so hard. A little prince was about to make an excursion. They asked him, will your highness go on horseback or by boat? He answered, I want to ride on horseback and take the boat. We want to have everything, want to be everything. We want to know all the pleasures of happiness and every depth of suffering. We want the pathos of action and the peace of the onlooker. And I think that's a great point there. We want the feelings of this, of being someone who's out there doing the action, but at the same time, we want peace of just the person who sits back. And that's the struggle really that he's having throughout this novel. And this is reaching up to the climax of it. We desire both the desert stillness and the uproar of the forum. At once, we wish to be the thoughts of the thinker and the voice of the crowd. We want to be both melody and harmony. At once, how can such a thing be possible? I want to ride on horseback and take the boat. So he's acknowledging kind of the absurdity of life, this feeling of both being in the action, but not having to risk the consequences of being a man of action or a person who goes out and does what they feel like they need to do or what they have to do. Dr. Glas has, even though he's a doctor, he has kind of a repulsion for people. He's disgusted by a lot of people. He calls them scum. He begins this, the very first paragraph talks about, he references Schopenhauer and this story about Schopenhauer beating someone with a stick just because he was repulsed by the person, and that's how he feels about the clergyman, the vicar, Mr. Gregorius. So in this opening scene, kind of capturing how he feels about the human species and also mixing in these issues that he has with intimacy with others, he says, even today, I've hardly recovered from my astonishment. Why must the life of our species be preserved and our longing stilled by means of an organ we use several times a day as a drain for impurities? Why couldn't it be done by means of some act composed of dignity and beauty, as well as of the highest voluptuousness, an action which could be carried out in church before the eyes of all, just as well as in darkness and solitude, or in a temple of roses, in the eye of the sun, to the chanting of choirs and a dance of wedding guests. So he's questioning, why does the species have to be perpetuated through procreation, through this organ that is used to drain impurities? And why can't it be done by some act that is more beautiful and more celebrated in front of people? So again, he's really getting at a core issue with humanity, the fact that the continuum of life would appear to be a beautiful thing, but it's done with a lot of shame around it. It's done behind closed doors. We don't want to expose these body parts or these actions to anyone. And it's done by, as he says, an organ that's also, connected to the repulsive and the disgusting in the world. And this is how he feels about humans. So when Mrs. Gregorius comes to him, he's repulsed by her husband. He hates him, but he quickly kind of falls in love or becomes smitten with her. She avoided my glance as she said this, but only now for the first time did I really see her. For the first time I saw a woman was standing in my room, a woman whose heart was full of desire and misery. In the flower of her womanhood, perfumed with love, yet blushing with shame that this perfume should be so strong and noticeable. So he's commented on the fact that he's seeing her because she's in love. She's in love with this other man, this guy named Rek. But she can't hide this fact that she's in love, and that's actually why he's noticing her and why he sees her. It's almost like a scent, like a perfume, as he says. And later, this would be a few days later, he says, I think I understand now. A woman in love has just that magic spell about her walk, her complexion, her whole being, which alone can hold me in thrall. And it was always such women who awakened my desires. But naturally, being in love with other men, they did not see me. Instead, there were others who looked at me. After all, I was a qualified doctor of youthful years and with the makings of a good practice. Therefore, I was regarded as an excellent match. Indeed, I became the object of a good deal of obtrusive attention. But it was always love's labor lost. So he's a tragic figure. He's only attracted to women who are in love with other people because it's them being in love with others that actually makes them attractive. They're this, as he says here, they have a magic spell about them, the way they walk, their complexion, and that is what holds him in thrall. Yet at the same time, they have no interest in him because they're in love with someone else. Unfortunately, you would think maybe if someone was in love with him, he would still be attracted to them, but that's not the case. And there is a character in here who does express some interest in him, but he just puts her off, and in the end, nothing comes about. His disdain for people, for human life. This is where the implied promotion, or it's more than implied, the promotion of abortion comes. There's a scene here where he talks about a number of women who come to him wanting abortions, and every time he refuses to do it, he says he has a duty, which he thinks is kind of nonsense, but he says this anyways just to kind of, to keep them out so he doesn't have to get involved in their affairs and also risk, jeopardizing his practice. Anyway, I don't much care for the family. This is a certain family he's talking about because they wanted to abort this child, this first child. On closer inspection, I see the wife is young and still quite beautiful. So he's seen them out when he's out just hanging out at a cafe. He remembers them. But she has put on a good deal of weight, and her complexion is almost too bloomin'. I suspect her of passing her mornings sitting in cake shops, drinking stout to her pastries, and gossiping with women friends. And the master of the household is a counter-jumper Don Juan. I think that means he's kind of running around trying to pick up any girls he can. From his appearance and manner, I should judge him faithless as a cock. Furthermore, they both have the habit of scolding the waiter in advance for negligence they expect of him. A habit which makes me feel sick. In a word, scum. So that's when we're introduced to this family that wanted, again, the wife wanted this abortion. He doesn't give it to her, and then he sees her out with this child, and he thinks, is that the child? Look at what a good thing that I didn't that I didn't give you this abortion. Here you are with this young, attractive child. But then just maybe 20 pages later, this is July 17th. No, sometimes life shows a face altogether too vile. So again, the theme of life is actually harsh and ugly. Only a moment ago, I came home from a night call. I was woken by the telephone ringing, took a name and address. It was quite close by, and a hint of what the trouble was. A child had suddenly fallen seriously ill, probably the crop at the home of so-and-so, a wholesaler. A cloud of drunken nightbirds and whores swarming about my coattails, I hurried through the streets. It was the 4th floor of a house in a side street, the name I just heard on the telephone, in which I now saw on the front door, seemed familiar. Although I could not place it, the wife received me in dressing gown and petticoat. It was the lady from Djursgaard Brun. So that's the woman he saw who wanted that abortion. The same I remember from that time years ago. So I thought, it's the pretty little boy. I was shown through a narrow dining room and an idiotic hallway, illuminated just then by a greasy kitchen lamp placed in the corner of a whatnot. and so into a bedroom. Evidently, the master wasn't at home. It's our eldest boy who is ill, the wife explained. She led me over to a little bed. In it lay not the pretty little lad, but another, a monster, enormous, ape-like, cheekbones, a flattened cranium, little evil, stupid eyes. It was obvious at first glance, an idiot. So this was her firstborn. It was him she was carrying under her heart that time. This was the seed she begged me on her knee to free her from, and I answered with a duty, life, I don't understand you. So he refused this abortion to give this abortion to this woman. Later, he sees her out with this young child, and he thinks, oh, what a good thing I did. And now he sees the actual child, which he says is a monster, enormous ape-like, flattened cranium, little stupid eyes. It's an idiot. And he's saying, I don't understand life. This is horrible. I should have aborted this child. And then he ends this entry, two things. One, a quote from Seneca, when a child is born deformed, it is drowned. That's the quote from Seneca. And then he says, every idiot at the Eugenia home costs more in annual upkeep than a healthy young laborer earns in annual income. And I think that is the advocacy of abortion there that I think people were offended by when this novel came out in 1905, which again, like I said, abortion itself, I don't think would be considered so offensive today, but certainly have an abortion because you're deeming the child ugly or stupid, I think that would be still offensive. But that's Dr. Glas's perspective. Dr. Glas talks the clergyman into going away. He believes for his health, he needs to go away for several weeks, get some rest. He does this, but eventually he comes back, and Glas realizes he has to do something. And interestingly, through this diary format, we get to see the plotting and kind of the rationale. We get to see Dr. Glas kind of convince himself of doing this action, which we know to be wrong, and he knows this to be wrong, but he's torn between it. And he wants to do it. So on August 10th, there's something flattened and empty about a watch without hands. It's reminiscent of a dead man's face. I am sitting looking at such a watch. In point of fact, it isn't a watch at all, but an empty case with a beautiful old watch face to it. Just now I saw it in the window of the hunchback watchmaker in the alley as I was coming home through the hot yellow twilight, a strange twilight. I've imagined such ends to days in the desert. I went in and asked the watchmaker, who has mended my watch for me once, what sort of watch it was that had no hands. So obviously this has a lot of symbolic significance, a watch with no hands. Time always seems to be bearing down on Dr. Glas, and here he goes. He's looking at this, intrigued by this watch with no hands, which reminds him of a dead man's face. He threw me a coquettish, hunchback smile and showed me the lovely old silver case, a fine piece of work. He had bought the watch at an auction, but the works were worn out, useless, and his intention had been to put in some new ones. I bought the case as it was. My intention is to put some of my pills inside it and carry it in my right-hand waistcoat pocket as an appendage to my watch, a variant only to Demosthenes' idea of poison in a pen. There's nothing new under the sun. So once we know that Dr. Glas is walking around with these pills, it's only a matter of time that he's actually going to use them. Again, this is cyanide. It's set up in a way that he explained earlier that it will give some time before the person who takes them actually dies. He pretends to take them later when he's out, having some soda water, as he likes to do. Gregorius comes, he pretends that he takes a pill. Gregorius asks, "Oh, what is that?" He knew he would ask that, and says, "Oh, it's this new pill. I also have a bad heart." And Gregorius wants one and gives it to him, and he drops dead. But this right here lets us know this is going to come. This is our Chekhovian gun. It's just a matter of time now that he's going to use these pills that were introduced earlier in the book. Also, it has this other symbolic value of the fact that he's carrying them around in this watch that has no hands, so time has stopped, has no way to tell time, and that also looked like a dead man's face, and that's what they're carrying death in them. And that's actually how he described the pills earlier in the book, as kind of this silent fury, silent death being carried around in these little capsules. As I mentioned already, a big theme in this is action. And I think this intersects with this idea of morality and kind of the Nietzschean idea of the Übermensch, that some people have different moral codes applied to them. They are above the normal laws. I'm not saying that Glas is saying this, but he does have this. There are some shadows of this idea, and this comes about after he's actually killed Gregorius and seems to have gotten away with it. They don't know what's going on. He meets a friend of his at a Swedish sauna who worked for the newspaper. This is a guy named Markel, and Markel says, "Let me tell you something. There are 3 sorts of people: thinkers, scribblers, and cattle. It is true, I secretly count almost all who are called thinkers and poets among the scribblers, and most of the scribblers belong among the cattle." So the cattle would be like the sheeple, the people who just kind of do what's expected of them, don't take action in life. But that's not the point. The business of thinkers is to search out the truth. There is, however, a secret about truth, which oddly enough is but little known, although I should have thought it was clear as daylight. And it is this: truth is like the sun. Its value depends wholly upon our being at a correct distance away from it. So this is a memorable scene. Truth is like the sun, which I'm sure people have said this before, like it, lets you see everything. But he's added on to this, that its value is how far away from it we are. If we're too close to it, we get burned. If the thinkers were allowed to have everything their own way, they would steer our globe straight into the sun and burn us all to ashes. Small wonder then, their activity sometimes causes the cattle to become restive and bellow. Put out the sun in the name of Satan. Put it out. It's the business of us scribblers to preserve a correct and satisfactory distance from the truth. A really good scribbler, and there aren't many, understands with the thinker and feels with the cattle. It's our job to protect the thinkers from the rage of the cattle and the cattle from too hefty doses of truth. And I think this part is worth repeating. A really good scribbler understands with the thinker but feels with the cattle. So that's this, there's this underlying idea here that there are different types of people, a hierarchy. So the cattle would be not very intelligent, but we need to, the great thinker, the Übermensch, needs to think, needs to feel with them, needs to be in tune with their feelings, but have the foresight and the thought to understand, what the thinker, what the man of action understands about the world, and try to straddle that. And I think that's really what Dr. Glas is trying to do in this novel, and how he kind of justifies the killing of the vicar. But as I said, it doesn't turn out well for him. He is unhappy afterwards. He doesn't get punished, though he seems to be punishing himself to a certain degree. And he remembers the time when the vicar's wife came to see him. At this point, her husband's dead and her lover has gone off and married someone else. It seems to be the lover was maybe younger, very ambitious. He marries some wealthy woman. So both Mrs. Gregorius and now Dr. Glas are both kind of left with unhappiness. He says, I walked on thinking of her. I recalled the first time she came to me and asked for my help, how she suddenly bared herself and revealed her secret, quite unnecessarily. How warmly her cheek burned that day. I remember I said, such things must be kept secret, meaning her affair. And I wanted to say it. I wanted you to know who I am. Supposing now I go to her with my need, as she once came to me. Go to her and say, it is more than I can stand alone. Knowing who I am, wearing a mask always for everyone, I must reveal myself to one other. I must reveal myself to one other person. One other must know who I am. Oh, we should both go out of our minds. So he's thinking about going and revealing the truth to her. He feels like he needs to share this. He feels like he's living with a mask on now that he's a murderer, but going on pretending that he's not. But he decides that he won't because both of them will go out of their minds, not just him. So he doesn't actually end up doing this. And by the end, it would appear that he just goes living on unhappily, and so does Mrs. Gregorius. She has talked previously about maybe killing herself, and I think being that Dr. Glas carries around cyanide pills, that's a possibility. So this is a dark novel. It's excellently written. It's exciting to read. It gives you this deep insight to a disturbed mind, and for that alone, it's very instructive.